Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third workshop of our research skills training workshop boot camp series. This morning we have Dr. Natasha Leathers with us. Dr. Leathers is an assistant professor in the Department of Nursing at North Carolina Central University. Dr. Leathers received her BS in nursing from Old Dominion University and her MS and PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Dr. Leathers currently practices as an occupational health family nurse practitioner and serves as the director of community engagement of the Community Engagement Corps and principal investigator for the Diabetes Family Project. That project is designed to develop a family-focused intervention for rural African Americans with type 2 diabetes. We'd like to welcome Dr. Natasha Leathers.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Okay. Thank you, Ms. McRae, for your introduction, and thank you all for inviting me here today. I look forward to sharing some information with you about conducting field research, which is my specialty area and what I do pretty much every day when I'm not practicing as a nurse practitioner. And so, the name of my project that I do field research on is called the Diabetes Family Project, and as Ms. McRae said, it's a project where we're going out into a rural community and we're doing an intervention to benefit people who have type 2 diabetes as well as their family members. So first I'd like to give acknowledgments to my team, and they're the people that helped me get this all done. And without a fabulous team, I think there aren't any accomplishments. And when you think about, I have a psychologist that works with me, and that's Dr. Eaton, and as well as a dietitian, a number of coordinators that work with me, and lots of students. I think students are the key to keeping us moving forward with research that is innovative, and it keeps us productive too. I have students from public health, psychology, as well as nursing students. And this particular grant is funded by NIH, it's by NIMHD, and it's part of the P20. So when you think about conducting field research, one of the things that I like to tell people, there are some basic rules you always have to remember when you're going out into the field. And I think those rules kind of start with know your community. And if you know your community, you can collaborate and do some team building in the community. But the other thing is that you'll be able to design a research project that is conducive for the community as well as for science. And then the last thing is finding out what your results are. So here's the part one, know your community, and what does that mean? So I like to say, for me, I started out as very young, and this is kind of like, I think, where I got to know my community. So in the far right, that's my grandmom, and that's my granddad in the middle. But I remember knowing that I was going to do something in rural communities when I was in the 4th grade. I asked my mom to give me a picture in the 4th grade. She said she couldn't find one, but she did find a picture of my family reunion when I was like about 4 years old, and this is somewhere I think like in the 5th or 6th grade. But anyway, when I was in the 4th grade, I'm originally from Virginia, and my family is from a rural area in Virginia, and it's a place called Cortland. And it's funny, when I was coming into Albany, I talked to the lady and I was asking her what kind of shuttle bus was going to pick me up from the airport, and she's like giggling, wondering where the heck I think I am, that I think a shuttle bus is going to pick me up from the airport. But as I can see now that I'm here and I'm looking around, where my family is from, it's much more rural than Albany. In this hometown, we have 2 stoplights. And it's a lot of pasture, it's a lot of cornfields and crops and things like that. But that's where I spent my summers. It's where I would go when I was in graduate school on the weekends, because I was having a hard time with all the stuff that I was being required to do, and it gave me peace of mind. But anyway, when I was in the 4th grade, my grandfather had a major heart attack. And at that time, not that I'm 80, but I am 40, but at that time, when I was in the 4th grade, this particular county was very segregated. And the hospital was a hospital where if you were a minority, you had certain jobs that you could do. and you were a housekeeper, and you were a cook, and those were the type of things that you did. But as minorities, we didn't do too many other functions in this hospital. So when my grandfather had this heart attack, that was my experience to realizing that, one, I was a child, but I also was a minority in a system in which I didn't understand and I really couldn't navigate. And when my grandfather was in the ICU unit, I'm out there crying because I want to go and see him because I was really close to my granddad. And the nurse says to me and my mother, she can't come back here because she'd bother him. And we don't want little kids in here worrying our patients. And I remember saying to the nurse, I said, you know, but I love my granddaddy and he wants to see me. He's sick and I would make him feel better. And she said to my mom, just go ahead and take her to the waiting room. And I remember that, and I was in the 4th grade, and I remember, and I said to my mom when we got in the waiting room crying, I said to my mom, I said, you know what? One day, I'm gonna come back here, and I'm gonna do something for people that look like me. Because clearly, we need it. I probably didn't say it as articulate as what I'm saying right now, but I said to my mom, Mom, I'm gonna come back here and make a difference one day. I'm gonna grow up and do something. That's what I said. My mom says, okay. So eventually my granddad did come out of the ICU unit and he went on the floor. And I told my granddaddy, I said, Granddaddy, I'm gonna do something for people like us because it's not fair what happens here. Kissed me on my forehead like all good grandparents do. And he said to me, he says, I know you will one day, baby, just keep at it. So then I went on to nursing school at Albany University. The year before I graduated, the Thanksgiving, I went to my grandparents' house because we spent holidays with them too. But I sat on my granddad's lap because I really was a grandma and granddaddy's baby. And my grandfather, very, very religious man, said to me on Thanksgiving Day, he said to me, I know you're going to graduate next year. I want you to keep it up. He said, but I may not be here to see you graduate. He said, because the Lord has told me my time is near. That's what he said. And I said, oh, Granddaddy, stop it. Whatever, I don't believe you, and I'm just talking to him like he hasn't said anything. But my grandfather died that Saturday. So it was 2 days later, but I never forgot what he said to me. He told me in that conversation, not only did he think that he was not going to be here and that the Lord was calling him home, he said his work was done, but he told me, don't forget your dreams. This is for you, and God has given you this purpose, and follow that. Is what he said. So I did graduate, and I did go on to graduate school. And I knew that when I went to graduate school, I said, you know what, Natasha, you got to go to a top university because you want to get big time money to go back home and do something. So I went to, at that time, it was the #2 school in the country to get my master's as well as my PhD, because I figured that I need the credentials to do something that I could do at home with my family and with people that look just like me. And I didn't want to do it with $10,000 or $20,000. I wanted to do it with at least $1 million. So I say all of this to you all because I know that some of you all in undergrad, and then I have some of you all who are just a few years out of undergrad. And for those of you who are just a few years out of undergrad, such as myself, dream big, because you can always accomplish your dreams if you stay to it. So persevere through everything and know that just keep your mind set on what your prize is. So I show these pictures because I knew this community from the inside out because I was part of this community. I was raised there. My family was there. My grandmama and granddaddy lived there. This is my parents on their wedding day. And you look at my dad, he don't look too happy, but I suppose he's happy because he's been married for 40-something years to my mama. But this is my parents on their wedding day in that same community. This is at my family reunion when I was about 4 years old with all my cousins. Here I am in elementary. But this is the reason why I keep it going today. This is my daughter who's 4 years old. We took this last week. But I keep it going today because that same community, she's there all the time with my grandparents and my aunts and uncles because this is who I am. And no matter where I go back here because this is me. So I start with where we are. This is in Virginia. And the area that I'm talking about is right here in this circle. It's in southeastern Virginia. This area is a very rural area, like I said. 2 stoplight little county town. All the people know everybody. When you get pulled over by the state trooper, you hope it's somebody that dated your aunt, your uncle, or somebody, so you can say, please don't give me this ticket, because everybody knows everybody. So I go back to that community, and remember I told you this was a community that was a little bit different. And when you look at the statistics for this community in Virginia, this is called Southside and Crater Health District. They have the highest rates of diabetes in the state, but even more so when you look at them, look at the comparison to Virginia, the state itself. Their diabetes rate is about 9%. And this little area where my family is from, the diabetes rate is at 16%. When you look at diabetes prevalence, when you look at the county health district next to it, it's about 13%. So this is an area where diabetes, it's prolific, it's prevalent. Almost everybody got it. If you go to the family reunion, you can ask people to stand up and say, who has diabetes? And you'll get at least a quarter of the people to stand up, because that's what it is. Then when you look at age-adjusted prevalence, and just look at diabetes as far as age is concerned, you see that African Americans are much more likely to have diabetes than any other minority group. And then when you think about diabetes and its effect, once you have diabetes, you're much more likely to suffer different complications. Some of those complications are blindness. So the #1 cause of preventable blindness in the United States for African Americans is diabetes. If you don't control your diabetes, you are likely to have some diabetic retinopathy and lose your eyesight. If you have diabetes, you're much more likely to have kidney disease and go on dialysis. After you've gone on dialysis, you may be 40, you may be 50, but your chances of surviving beyond 5 or 6 or 7 years for dialysis is pretty slim. Most people, once they get on dialysis, are going to die within 5 to 7 years. Okay? So think about what happens when you have diabetes that is uncontrolled. Amputations. If you have diabetes and it's uncontrolled, you're much more likely to have an amputation. You're going to have, it might start with your toes, then it gets up to your knee, and who knows, it could go above the knee. But this is also the most likely cause in which someone will have a preventable amputation, is just because they have diabetes that they're not controlling. So when you think about diabetes just in general, diabetes is a disease that means that your body is not able to use the glucose that you have in your body. I'm just going to take a little second. What are your majors? Kind of start over here. What are your majors?
I'm Charles Mange, a business major with concentration in healthcare administration.
Okay. And?
My name is Dewan Clanton. I'm a dual marketing business admin major.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Demetrius Carey. I'm a criminal justice major with a minor in psychology.
Great. Okay. Engineering major. Wow. Okay, so my business and my engineers, building buildings, taking care of business, keeping the money going. And my 4 actually. Mm-hmm.
I am a forensic science major with a minor in chemistry.
Okay.
Biology major, minor in chemistry.
Okay.
Forensic science major, minor in chemistry.
Math major.
Wow, okay. No nursing majors. Wow, where are my nurses at? Okay, so I just wanted to get these majors because it helps me know what I need to say as I talk about the disease in and of itself. So when you think about diabetes, it basically is the inability of the body to utilize glucose. Some people call it sugar. And that's what my family always called it. It was like, oh, you just got sugar. But sugar isn't because you ate 1 too many pieces of cake. But people like to say that's what it is. You eating too many desserts. But it really is your body's inability to use the food that you eat. And that food may be cake, but that food is anything that's a carbohydrate. And that's what type 2 diabetes is. So when you think about complications and related to diabetes, and you look at African Americans in general, if you look at African Americans and their diabetes death rates, they have 45.3%. But if you look at European Americans, they're at 22.7. So what you're thinking about is, as an African American male, you're almost twice as likely to die as a result of having diabetes than you are if you were European American. And then you look at the same, it's more than that for females. And so that ratio is about 2 times more likely. And then for females, it's 2.4 times more likely. And African Americans in general are more likely to die at 2.2 times more likely, just because they have diabetes. So when I think about diabetes and all different things, all of these, and what I'm talking about, is called health disparities. Health disparities is a huge topic that we're talking about now at National Institutes of Health. It's all over the news, and everything is about what is a health disparity. So I actually wrote your definition about health disparities, and what it is, and this is by Centers for Disease Control. They're preventable differences in the burden of disease, injury, violence, or opportunities to achieve optimal health that are experienced by socially disadvantaged populations. So what does that really mean? It means that if you are a minority, your health outcomes might not be as beneficial than if you weren't a minority. If you live in a rural area, because rural versus urban, the health outcomes are different. So if you live in a rural area, your health outcomes are probably not going to be as nice as someone who lives in a major metropolitan area who has a medical center on every block. Okay? If you are what they call socioeconomically disadvantaged, and what that means is you earn below the poverty line, or you earn something close to poverty, being in poverty, you are much less likely to have a great outcome as far as your health is concerned. So all your health outcomes are going to be a little bit different. If your education is a little bit lower, meaning that you didn't graduate from high school, perhaps you can or cannot read, your health outcomes are not going to be as high as someone else who maybe went to graduate school. So when you think about health disparities affect a lot of people. It's not just minority based. It's geographically based. It's economically based. It even may be politically based. When you think about political, think about religion and politics. What are some of the groups that you expect may not get the same outcomes as other groups, just based upon politics or religion and things like that? Here, even here in the United States. Can you think of one?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to blood transfusions, with a certain group, denomination of Jehovah's Witnesses who don't believe in transfusions, and oftentimes patients will die for not getting treatment that's needed.
Absolutely. And when you think about Jehovah's Witness, and these are persons that come into the hospital, and no matter what they come in, and I echo your point, no matter what they're in the hospital for, if they are a Jehovah's Witness, they cannot have blood products, which means that they can have a perfectly what we call curable reason for being there, but they will, because of their religion, be allowed to, I guess you could say, die, because we cannot replace blood products. So these are people might come in because they've had a major vehicle accident and there's a lot of blood volume loss, and there's nothing that we can do to replace blood volume other than give a blood transfusion, so we lose them. Another times when in the hospital when I've seen us lose people who were Jehovah's Witness is in childbirth. I see it, and immediately after surgeries. That's when we tend to see that more often. The other thing is, think about some of the things that are going around politically now related to people who look like they're from the Middle East. Think about how things changed after 2011, and how people who had a certain look, people just assumed they were terrorists. And there were places that people who had that look, they just couldn't go anymore. So imagine what their health outcomes start to look like. People who were of Islamic faith. Think about even now, although we are away from that for some years, there's still a lot of, tension when we see someone who has a certain look. So when you think about health disparities, it's beyond the color of your skin. It could be religion, it could be political, it could be economical, it can be educational. Health disparities are what you're going to really see, especially in a capitalistic society. And I know this is definitely not about capitalism, this particular lecture, but I just wanted you to think about how health disparities affect people regardless of so many different variables. So when you think about health disparities, what we call this is social determinants of health. And we're trying to say that it's the conditions in which people are born, live, grow, and age that influence how people become sick, what risk factors they're exposed to, how they access services, and how they use those services. So I go back to my granddaddy. My granddad was in a hospital years ago that was, for the most part, it was kind of segregated in what minorities could do. But my grandmom had a stroke and went to that same hospital, and it's been about 5 years. And my mom and dad took her to the hospital because she was having a stroke. And I'm on my cell phone telling my mother and father what to do. And you know, this is one of my plugs for something that I just truly believe is great. It's BC powder. Okay? BC powder. Let me tell you why I love some BC powder. BC powder is not only an anti-inflammatory, but it's an anti-platelet. Okay? So if you ever think that someone is having a stroke and they're older, the most likely cause in which someone is going to have a stroke or some type of what they call cerebral vascular accident is because they have a clot that has blocked one of their blood vessels. There's another reason why people have strokes, and it's because one of their blood vessels have burst. But when they're older, you're much more likely to see someone that have a clot that forms in their blood vessel, and that's why they have a stroke. So my mom called me, and she says, your grandmother is in the back seat, and she can't move part of her body, and her face is twisted. What should I do? My grandmother was blessed because she was having a stroke in my mom and dad's back seat of the car in this rural area. This rural area doesn't have a rescue squad that sits in a building and you hit 911 and they come running to your house. You hit 911 and the operator said, hey y'all, go to the rescue house and go to so-and-so-so. How long you think it take them to get to my grandmama's house? They got to come from their houses because it's a purely volunteer. City can't pay for that. It's volunteer. So they come from their houses, and fortunately, they try to have people who are right there in the vicinity, so this, you know, the transportation, but they get there about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on where you are in this little town. So I say to my mom and dad, the hospital is about 25 minutes away. So I say to my parents, I say, hey, don't call the ambulance. Burn rubber, go down to the hospital and go in grandmama's cabinet, because my grandmama's a BC powder lady. I said, and run in her medicine cabinet, get out the whole pack of the BC powder. I said, and just look at grandma, because when people are having stroke, they may not be able to speak, but they are able to understand you. I said, you only have a few minutes where grandmama is probably still going to be able to swallow without gagging. I said, get the BC powder, put it in her mouth, and tell grandma, just keep swallowing, keep swallowing, keep swallowing. And I said, just give her little sips of water to get it down with. But the good thing about BC powder is that if you put it in your mouth, it starts dissolving on your tongue anyway, because it's just powder. That's why I love some BC powder. I tell everybody, if you're old, get you a box of BC powder. Tell somebody, if I ever lay out on the ground, put that BC powder in my mouth and just work my mouth. Get that stuff dissolving on my tongue. And I told my mother, I said, Mama, get that BC powder in her mouth. I said, and give about 5 or 6 of them. I said, because what we're going to do is we're going to try to bust the clot on the way to the hospital. So this just goes to talk about care that you receive just by virtue of where you're located. So my grandmother's in the back seat having an active stroke. My dad is on the little rural county highway going to the hospital. He gets to the hospital. My mom runs in the emergency room and she says to them, I need some help. My mom was in the car having a stroke. They said, someone will be with you in a minute. So my dad, who's on the cell phone, because I'm on the cell phone the whole time, he runs in, gets a wheelchair, puts my grandmom in the wheelchair. He wheels her in. And I said, Mama, keep me on the phone. So my mom walks back up to the reception area and she says to them, my mama's having a stroke. My daughter is a family nurse practitioner and she told me what to do, and you all are supposed to bring her back right now. She's going to need a CT scan to see if you all can give her one of the emergency clot busters. They said, we'll be with you in a minute. Have a seat. I said, Mama, I'm going to hang up. I said, because at that moment I was actually practicing and I was in my own practice. I said, I'm going to go ahead and tell them to cancel all my patients for the day and I'm going to go ahead and come home. I said, I'm going to call you back. If they don't have her out there in 5 minutes, I said, let me know, because somebody should be moving my grandmama to the back. My mother didn't call me back in 5 minutes. She called me back in 10 minutes. She said, your grandmama's still in the waiting room. What does that tell you? What does that tell you about the care that occurs in rural hospitals? Because sometimes care is based on not only what you look like, who you know, how much you can pay. So at that moment, I said, let me speak to the receptionist. And I told the receptionist, I said, hey, I know that my grandmother's supposed to be back and you all are supposed to be giving her scans at this point. If you don't get her back there, I'm going to sue this hospital and I'm going to put my name on the title. I said, I'm going to no longer say Southampton Memorial. It said Natasha Green's Hospital. Get her back there, and I need to speak to an attending right now. Now, how many people have my background in medicine and that would know that? How many of you would have known to call and knew all the different things to say? Knowledge is power. Okay? Because other families would have went there and they'd have just went crazy. They'd have acted a fool in the waiting room, but it wouldn't have been anything that could be done. So that's how social determinants determine your health outcomes. So that was a blessing. My grandmother did. She's still living today, and she came out of it. I say that's by the grace of God, but it's also by quick thinking, because that BC powder worked. It really did. It worked. My grandma prayed all night that night, because I was in the room with her that night. And I said to my grandma, as she prayed all night, I cried all night, I prayed all night. We stayed up all night. But my grandmother walked out the hospital with her own 2 feet, talking just like before, 3 days after admission, because that BC powder worked. But the other thing is that God said it wasn't her time, and we stayed faithful to that. This is not a religious ceremony, let me just tell you, this presentation. However, I do believe that religion does play a part in my life, but it also plays a part in what I do and in my family. So I don't mind sharing that with you, but I won't be asking people to come join a church immediately after this presentation. So when I talk about Emporia, Virginia, and this is one of the major cities right next to where my grandma lives, and this is where I did the study, and you look at different things that they're doing. In Emporia City, when you just look at premature death is at 11,000. This is for all people that live in there. This is no matter what race you are, what your socioeconomic status is, this is where you are. So these people, as you can see from the statistics, almost twice as likely to die before their time, just because they live in this one little area. Look at where we are with the state. Look at where we are with our national benchmark. State over 2 times more likely. This is only because their zip code is the zip code that it is. If they lived anywhere else in the state, they probably would live a little bit longer. 33% of them are obese. Obesity leads to heart disease, strokes, blood pressure problems, cholesterol problems. Obesity is a precursor to a lot of different illnesses. Physical activity, only 30% are physically active. But imagine, do you think there's a gym in this area? Nope. If you're out there running, you're running on a highway. Okay? When you think about high school graduation, 89% of the people in this county have graduated from high school. So that's a lot of people who've never graduated from high school. My grandfather only went to the 6th grade. My grandma went to the 7th grade. My uncle only went to the 10th grade. Okay? So I have family members that live here right now. And it's not that my grandmama is 100. She's 94. So she only went to middle school. My grandfather has passed away because he did die from a heart attack. Only went to 6th grade. My uncle is in his 60s. Went to 10th grade. I have cousins that live in this county right now who are younger than I am, who are in their 20s, that did not graduate from high school. So, whereas when you go to other major areas, you think that high school graduation is a given. Not in this county. It's a choice and it's an option because people have so many different things that they have to do just to make ends meet. And one of those things is they got to go out there and get a job. College, 44% have college. I bet this is racially divided. Okay? Because people that look like us, we working to make ends meet. That's what we do in this county. Unemployment is at 12.5%, but look where it is in the state. It's only at 6.2%. Children in poverty, 34%. Violent crime rate, this is out of 100,000 people. Look where the crime is. Outrageous. That means that if you live in this county, you're going to see a crime at some point in time in your life. And it's much more likely that you're going to see a crime multiple times in your life. Just because you live in this one little area in Virginia. When you think about the population of this area, it's not highly populated, it's rural. But this is an area where all you have to do is live there and you're going to see crime as part of just being around. Uninsured, 18%. So when you think about what is life like for everyone that lives in this county, it's a good life in some ways because we all got love. I was a product of this area. So it's good in that way. But in other ways related to our health outcome, it's not so good. So when I think about the problems that we have, and this is how I got to what my research topic is, I started thinking about what is going on with my family, what is going on with the people around us, what is happening in this population that's just not working out. So I had to think about it. So people who have, African Americans who have type 2 diabetes that live in rural areas, they have the highest rates of diabetes prevalence, the highest rates of just having chronic diseases, they have the highest rates of death just because they live in this area and when we compare them to European Americans. We show studies that we do nationally, that we do all the time, and it shows that if you have African Americans in your study, that they will respond to the study, but maybe after you leave, it goes right on back to where it used to be. So they respond for those 6 weeks you're there, 6 months you're there, but when you come back and follow up on them in a year or 2 years, they're back to exactly where they used to be. When you think about diets, what's happening in African Americans? So what we found is that, one, diets are influenced by family members and friends. What we eat is social. And we have fun when we eat. And it becomes not necessarily about the nutrients that we're getting, but it becomes about sitting down, talking to people, and doing all of those things also around food. And I'm not saying that what we eat is bad, because that's not true. But dietary habits for African Americans are as much nutritional as they are social. So when I started thinking about this problem, I said, you know what? I'm going to apply for a grant, and I'm going to go back and see what we can do to better educate African Americans that live in this community, but educate them to take better care of themselves. Educate them so that if I leave in 6 months, they'll still be fine and be able to move forward. So, I've talked to you about the area where I did my study. Now I want to talk to you about Georgia, because I thought we would bring it home to where you are right now. So here's what's going on in Georgia. And I did a broad expansion because I thought that I would get a number of different type students in here who weren't just nursing students. So here we are. Here's what's going on in Georgia. If you live in Georgia, because Georgia is mostly a rural state, you're 39% more likely if you are an African American male to die of cancer. If you're an African American female, you're 13% more likely to die of cancer. If you're in Georgia, the suicide rate for Hispanics is at 4.4% and 1.3% for African American men and 2.6% for white men. This number, and I want to just mention to you, these statistics were done in Georgia in 2008. This was the last health disparity report that you all did that was comprehensive in the state of Georgia. But I want to comment just about the second one because I know that rate has changed over the years. One of the most prevalent suicide rates for African American men have increased drastically within the last 2 to 3 years. And that's almost a national phenomenon that has occurred. It used to be that if you were African American, your chance of committing suicide was pretty much almost zilch. We did not do that. Now, if you're an African American male, people are killing themselves if they're African American men. We don't know why that is occurring. We don't know if it's economics. We don't know if it's the constant stress of being African American and being male in the country and society. We don't know. But we know this rate is doubling every single year for African American men. And there's a lot of work that we need to do to find out what's going on with our African American men. The other thing is that the death rate for diabetes in Georgia is 2 times higher for African American women than it is for European American women or for white women. Here's the other one that really just threw me for a loop. If you are an African American baby in Georgia, you are much more likely, 2 times more likely to die than if you were a white baby. So that means that as an African American, the day that you're born, you are 2 times more likely to die within that first year than any other baby in the state of Georgia. Here's our next one. Breastfeeding has become much more popular, but in the state of Georgia, if you're an African American mother, you're much less likely to breastfeed your children. And breastfeeding is one of the best things we can do for our children from a nutrition and immune standpoint. It makes our babies healthy. In Georgia, HIV and AIDS, 18.4 for 100,000 for African Americans, and it's only 2.5 for someone that's white. That's a huge discrepancy. 47% of the Hispanics in Georgia are uninsured, while 31% is your national report. Here's the other one. If you're in Georgia and you are a child, you're much more likely to have asthma just because you're in Georgia. So then what I did was, after I looked at what was occurring in Georgia, I started looking at what was occurring in Albany, so that you all would know what happens in Albany. So here you are, premature death. Look at where your premature death is, because I figured out Albany was in Dougherty County. So the Dougherty County area, because you live in this area, you're much more likely to have a premature death. That's die before your time. If you were in Albany, the chances are 21% of the people that live in this county say that their health is poor or fair. Only 16% of those people say that in Georgia. And when you look at it nationally, only 10% of the people talk about that. So there's a lot of people in this county that just don't feel good every single day. 35% of the people in this county are obese. Now here's a mind blower. 1,065 sexually transmitted diseases in Dougherty. That's some real stuff right there. That means that if I were to just think about the campus in general, that means that this campus has a pretty significant rate of STDs just on this campus because you're in this county. For all my fellas, I hope you're wearing condoms. For all my ladies, I hope you insisting that that man wears a condom. And I know that that's something that becomes I guess you could say it's real interesting to find out where college campuses are. But before I started working at my present institution, I used to work at an HBCU in the health center. And the health department contacted me because there was a huge increase of STDs in the zip code in which my campus was located. Specifically, it was for gonorrhea and chlamydia. And they wanted me to become part of a partnership to see what we can do to decrease those rates, because they realized that a lot of them were occurring on my campus. And I knew that we were getting a lot of positives too, because students were coming in and I was treating them and things like that. So what we did was this campus-wide initiative, and as part of the campus initiative, and this is truly some community stuff that we're talking about. So I started doing surveys all over the campus, doing them in dormitories, going to the cafeteria, going to classrooms. And at this particular campus, when you were on this campus, all freshmen had to take at least one course together. And so I went to every single one of those courses to make sure I could get a survey from everybody. So one of the questions I asked in the survey was, do you use condoms? The next question I asked, if you don't, why? And I had this according to males and according to females. So I had females who said yes or no. You know, most of my females probably were going to use condoms, and it was a majority. So I had about 60% of my African American females would say, yes, I use condoms. Okay? And for those who said, no, I don't, what do you think was the number one reason why they said, I don't use condoms? Because they said, I'm in a committed relationship. I'm with my boyfriend. That's what they said. Okay? Yeah, because he's mine. He's only mine. Okay? He's mine. I keep him in my back pocket and bring him out, let him talk and go to class. I put him right back in there as soon as he get out of class. That's what they told me. Now, what do you think my males said when I asked them, do you use condoms? Now, about 60% of my females said, we use condoms. My males, what percentage of my men said, we don't use condoms? Oh gosh, it was about 60% of them said, we don't use condoms. Okay? And guess what the reason they said they didn't use condoms? Because she don't ask and she doesn't insist, and I don't like it. Okay? I asked my women, when do you know you're in a monogamous relationship? Because that was the reason why they told me they didn't use condoms. How many dates you think it took before they thought they were in a monogamous relationship? And my men should know this. How many women, I don't know how many of you all are single in here, but how many times do you go out with a girl before she said, are we together? How many dates does it take? That's right. So, hey, this man right here is a Don Juan. Stand up. Wave your hand. Said one time with this brother, and she said, I'm yours and you mine. You know? Some of you all may not be quite as, skillful as he is. It might take you 2 or 3 dates. You know? Some of you could take 10. I don't know. But my point is, I heard some people say 1, but I also heard over here some people said 2 or 3. Okay? My women said it only took them 3 days before they felt they were in an exclusive relationship. Now I'm asking these same men who said these women were asking them in dates 1, 2, or 3, which was pretty consistent with what my female said. How many dates you think it took a man to feel he was with this girl one-on-one and he was down with her?
10.
About 15 to 20. Is that not? So he might be a Don Juan, but he obviously loves love. He said, only taking him 10. Don't take him 20. He know what he like when he like it. That's good. So imagine, so my point to telling you this was, I have these men out there having sex with multiple women. And all those women think that she's the only one. He realizes she's not the only one, but he's not using a condom because he don't like it and she doesn't insist. So the health department was right. I did have a high STD rate. But one of the issues was I had two groups of people together having sex with each other, but they're on two totally different wavelengths. You know, I got these girls who say I'm in this committed relationship, and I got these guys that say, yeah, I'm in a committed relationship with her, her, and her. And that was what reality was. But that's a quick community-based project that I did just because the health department called me and said, we need you to do something. So what we did was we started passing out condoms, but we published the results of our survey, and we showed it to everybody. Okay, I ran out of condoms. I used to give out free condoms in my health department. I ran out in 1 week because it was shocking to people to realize that, oh my gosh, this is what we said. Imagine how shocked my girls were to realize that the average number of partners that the men on that campus had was 5 at one time. And they thought they were the only ones. That was amazing to them. So yeah, so our STD rate went down considerably. I left, so I don't know where it is now, but it went down considerably because that reality check was huge. So I say to you, when you think about reality for Albany, look at where we are. So just like it was occurring in the area where I'm from, it's here too. It also may be on your campus. A community is what you decide is a community. It could be a campus, it could be a county, it could be a city, it could be a church. You ever heard of church health ministries? That's a community. A community is whatever you describe. So here's our first activity. So what you're going to do is you're going to get into groups of 4 or 8 people. And since you 4 are already together, we'll bring you here. And if you could move over there so that you'd be with them, would be fabulous. And you're going to talk about a disparity. And what I did was to make it more relevant to you, I gave you some statistics for this county in your handout. But the other thing that I did was, because I was not sure if you all would be health majors, I gave you one of the community projects that the CDC has highlighted and talk about field research that you can kind of read what that is. And on the back of one of these sheets of paper, I want you to describe a disparity of interest to you, okay? And we're going to explore whatever that disparity is throughout today. So talk about what that disparity is that you're interested in working through today. So you 4 are going to have to get a little bit closer because you're going to have to talk, okay? And think about, what do you think are the possible causes of the disparity that you are interested in? So I know that some of you all were business majors and things like that. So maybe your disparity of interest is related to unemployment. I don't know. But pick something that's of interest to you and that you can think of, what is the reason why this is occurring? For me, where I was in Virginia, I knew that the reason my disparity was occurring was because it was educational issues. It was family environment, expectations. There were so many different factors. So now I want you to identify yours and what those factors are. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes. Exercise equipment. We gave them pedometers. We gave them resistance bands so that they can work out at home. We gave them cookbooks. We gave them different meals. And each day that they came to the class, we actually fed them so that they could try a food that was a little bit lower in carbohydrates but was prepared in a little bit different way, because we have traditions that we like. And my point in feeding them was to say, hey, here's a tradition, but here's a little twist on it to make it healthier for you. The other thing that we did was we had a psychologist that came to each of those interventions. And what the psychologist did was talk to them about family dynamics, okay? Because although we are a people who, I think society sees us as always female dominated, but we are not a monolithic race. Every household is African American. It's not headed by some woman that can shake her head and her finger at the drop of a dime. And it kills me to see that on TV all the time. And every black woman isn't angry. So we had a psychologist come in who was African American, but who realized that not all black people are the same. There are households in which a black man is in it, and he running the show. I was brought up in one of those. My mama, I never saw my mama do all of this like I saw on TV. Never saw my mama doing all this stuff either. But I saw my father say, no, we're not going to have that in here today. And that means the house got quiet. Okay? So, I wasn't raised in a traditional household, but I had friends who weren't. And I had to acknowledge that in this community, there were going to be people that looked like me, but people who didn't. And so what that psychologist was there for was to help, no matter what your family looked like, to help you be able to communicate your needs better within your household. And those needs would be the needs that you need for dietary changes and to exercise a little bit more. Then we started talking to them about their diet, and we measured what they were eating and had them do recalls and food diaries and things like that. And our thought was, once you go through this component, it would in turn affect your hemoglobin A1C. Hemoglobin A1C is an average measure of the blood glucose over 3 months' time, okay? So the goal was to get this to decrease because it's the hemoglobin A1C that is predictive of death with type 2 diabetes. And obesity also predicts different things. So if your blood glucose is uncontrolled, you are much more likely, and we talked about this in the beginning, you're more likely to be obese, you're more likely to have heart attacks, you're more likely to have strokes, blood pressure problems, amputations, and dialysis. So the whole point was to get them to the point where their glucose would be controlled and that they would lose weight. So this is my conceptual framework of how I decided to do my study. And I go back to what I originally said. This idea started when I was a wee little one, and I just continued to come up with things and bring it to home as I got older, and then I got to this. So when you think about your conceptual frameworks and why you think things exist, realize that you are all experts. You have expertise in whatever you were born into, whatever neighborhood you lived in. What people look like that came from, I saw that guy, Vanessa was with me. What did he say? He was proud of his hood? I think that's what wasn't that what his shirt said? I'm proud of my hood, and my hood is proud of me. Okay, so I saw that on a t-shirt today when me and Miss McRae were together. But, oh, there he is right there, there he go. It was him, okay. He see his shirt said, I love my hood and my hood loves me. So what he is saying is, I know where I'm from. I'm an expert in where I'm from. And they love me. So he's an expert in whatever that is. And you are experts in whatever you are and what your exposures are. So that's how you determine what you're going to do. So my research hypothesis, like I said, was if African Americans with type 2 diabetes who attend diabetes education with their family members will experience a significantly greater improvement in glucose control, diabetes knowledge, family and function, and dietary intake quality than those who participate alone. The reason why I thought people who attended these classes by themselves wouldn't do quite as well is because we were talking to them and treating them as if they were living in isolation, you know? I can assure you that because I was raised in a traditional household, if my dad said to my mother, I'm not going to eat beef today, it was unlikely that my mother cooked beef on that day. Okay? So if my mother went to the doctor earlier that morning and the doctor said to my mother, I'm going to need you to cook some beef today because that's what we need you to do for your blood pressure. And my mother knew that my dad had already told her, we ain't eat no beef today. My mama won't eat beef that day. Nobody in the house is going to eat beef that day. Me, my sister, or my mama. Because my dad had already said we won't having beef. So when you have diabetes or any chronic disease, it's important to realize that no matter what you say in that doctor's office, that person got to go home to somebody. And people don't stop living because they came to see you. When I graduated from the master's program and I thought I had, like my grandma said, all the sense in the world. I just come out of nurse practitioner school. I've been practicing about a year. Probably an hour if you ask my patient. But I've been practicing about a year. And I was in a multi-specialty practice. I practiced in endocrinology, cardiology, and gastroenterology. So I was a multi-specialty nurse practitioner, which I still do, but I just do it in a different setting. So I diagnosed this woman with type 2 diabetes. It was an elderly lady, an African American. And I practiced in it was a suburb, but somewhat rural. And she was in her 80s. So I talked to her about her type 2 diabetes, told her what it meant and all of those things. And I remember, because she was sitting in the chair and I was sitting on the table where I did her examination, I was just talking to her and I said, here's the things that I need you to do. So I'd written her a prescription for 2 medications because her hemoglobin A1C was not controlled. It was too high, and I knew we had to do a whole lot to get her under some control. So this lady was in her 80s. I wrote her the 2 prescriptions. I told her that I needed her to decrease the fat in her diet because her cholesterol was also really high. Gave her something for her blood pressure. Talked to her about decreasing the salt in her diet. I told her that I needed her to start exercising. The recommendation was for 150 minutes in a week. So I told her that would be 30 minutes, 5 days a week. I talked to her about coming to the doctor more frequently so that we could keep her monitored. And I went on and on and on and on and on. And that lady, she looked at me and looked at me and looked at me and looked at me. And at the very end, I had given her 30 minutes of my spiel. And at the very end, she said to me, she said, honey, if you think I'm going to stop living because I saw you today for these little 30 minutes, you are crazy. She said, now what I want you to do is take some moments to think about the one thing that you want me to do before I come back to see you in 2 weeks. 'Cause I ain't doing nothing else. Okay? That was real. And you know what? What was real about it was she was brave enough to tell me. Whole lot of people sat and heard that spiel and didn't say a word. Just walked right on out my office. That lady told me, you must be crazy. And told me in a very eloquent manner. And she said to me, you got a whole lot of book sense too, I can tell you. She said, but I ain't got no common sense. That's what she said to me. And it was well received. And the reason why it was well received, because I had seen her a number of times before. I just hadn't given her hadn't talked to her a lot about her diagnosis before. But I knew she liked me, so I knew she wasn't trying to insult me. But I think she was kind of telling me what my grandmama used to say, book sense sometimes only will get you a little bit of the way. But you got to have some common sense sometimes. And her whole point was, I am 80-something years old. How much more life you think I got left, even if I did everything you told me to do? And not only that, why would I want to spend the next couple of years of my life suffering from a life in which I had and I loved? So her whole thing was, keep it real and be realistic. So she said to me, what was the one thing you need me to do? So I said to her, I tell you what, you tell me. What do you want to do? And she said to me, I'm going to go ahead and take these new medications you gave me, but I ain't going to do nothing else. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And I said, okay, fine. So when I saw her, believe it or not, she actually was in control when I saw her. So I don't know if she did do other things, but apparently the medications were a good selection, and she was in good control when I saw her. But I say all of that to say to you that no matter what illness you have, you got to be living outside of your illness. And that was my whole premise of when people have chronic diseases. They want to live too. They don't want to be a disease. And people always say that if you just give them some education, education alone doesn't change people. You can tell people every day. So if we look around the room, there's only a few of us in this room that are within our appropriate body mass, meaning that we are not overweight or obese, okay? So I'm just going to keep it real and say, I'm not one of those people. I'm considered to be overweight, okay? Now, You want to know how many times my doctor have said to me, Natasha, I'm going to need you to lose some weight. I got the knowledge and I know I need to lose some weight. Think I lost some weight yet? No. Because my doctor hasn't given me an opportunity to figure out how I'm going to lose this weight, take care of this baby, do this job, go into this community and do these experiments, and go to the gym, write these publications, and do all that other stuff. So when he says, Natasha, I know you need to lose some weight, I said, you right about that. And I keep it moving because we ain't talked about what I can do in that. Now, if he would say to me, Natasha, can you walk up the steps when you're in your job at your building? You know, instead of taking the elevator, walk up to the 3rd floor every day. Because I know, you know, I probably could do that. But the whole thing is about me losing weight and exercising 150 minutes a week, 5 days a week for 30 minutes. That just ain't gonna happen. So I just want you all to know that I am as real as the people that I'm treating and prescribing for every day. So no matter what you do in the community, remember, they are as real as you, and they have lives just like you do. So whatever intervention you give them, it has to be reasonable, it has to be incremental and allow them to advance in steps, and it has to give them options that if you can't go to the right, you might be able to go to the left. Because like if my doctor probably would have asked me to go up the elevator, go up the steps rather than the elevator, I probably could have done that. Right now, I still take the elevator. That's his fault. I'm just kidding. I'm going to do better. So, the specific aims of my project are, I wanted to develop an effective university-community partnership with this community. And what that meant was to partnership with different people in the community and be able to identify factors that the community thought was relevant to what was occurring with the type 2 diabetes. Also to look at what was occurring, what was causing the hypertension, and why people weren't doing some of the health behaviors that they wanted to, that they thought they should be doing, but they just couldn't. Like I remember one of the ladies in the community said to me, well, I would walk, but I'm scared I might get run over by one of them 18-wheeler trucks on the highway. So for her, that's real life. She lived off of Highway 58. There ain't no sidewalks on Highway 58, and there are no gyms in this community. So her whole point was, I guess I can walk around my grass a couple of times, but the ticks towards the back are so bad, and the animals in the grass, so I can't walk but so far from my house. That is real life. So remember, your interventions have to match what people can do, and it gives them options that still get you to your goal, but that are very realistic. The other thing that I wanted to say was your partnerships have to be with people who want to be a part of what you're doing. The other thing is, my other specific aim was to implement a family-focused intervention for African Americans with type 2 diabetes. And one of the things that I needed to do was to have a curriculum that no matter what day you attended the class, you get the same intervention. And I had to develop a curriculum that was for African Americans, that talked in the same language that they did, that used the same culture that they had. I knew that in this particular community, there are a lot of people in that community that go to church. Okay? So I knew that I had to recognize that Wednesday night was a night in which I could not have a class because I would lose half of my participants. I realized that in my curriculum, when I put something up there, that those people needed to look like us. I couldn't have a whole PowerPoint presentation with all European Americans up there, Hispanics, when I knew goodness well I was going to be with a community of African Americans. They want to see people that look like them. I knew that when I hired teachers, the teachers should look like them because they need to talk the lingo that they talk. So I say that because now I bring up one of the teachers that I hired, which is kind of funny. I always attend my intervention. I usually attend most of the classes. So one of the men asked my dietitian, and my dietitian is not African American. He said to her, What do you do when you're at Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner and somebody like your grandma fix your plate? Do you just eat everything she put up there, even though you know it doesn't go with, what you think you should eat? What do you do? So she said, just tell your grandma that you got diabetes and you ain't doing that stuff. And people looked at her like she was crazy. Because they said to her, well, I'm at a family gathering for Christmas. My grandma see that I'm not eating what she just put on my plate. The same food that I done ate for 10 years. Now she wondering, is she still a good cook? Does the food taste good or does the food taste bad? Or she like, oh my gosh, my baby got AIDS. He can't eat, he's sick, he got cancer. Because people associate, when you can't eat, people associate that with illness and being sick. They don't know what it is, but that's what they take. It's a serious illness. So his whole point to her was, I can't do that in my household. So she responded to him, well, I could do it in mine. I could just tell my grandma. And that was one of the times when I realized that she didn't have cultural competency. She did not understand that this was something that wouldn't be cool in a lot of different people's households who were African American. So one of the things that we suggested to him was, it's a 90-10 rule that we teach everyone who has type 2 diabetes. If you eat what you need to eat 90% of the time, 10% of the time, you might be able to do something a little different. So if you already know, you got to go to Christmas dinner with your grandmama and your granddaddy, and this is what you do in this household on that day. Do what you need to do to keep it in that 90 for that whole week. Because that day is going to be your 10% where you're going to kind of go to the right. And it's okay. Because that one day doesn't ruin your life. It doesn't ruin your diabetes control. It allows you to live. Remember, like that old lady told me, she had to live too. It allows you to live too. And what you do is go ahead and have fun and sit down and socialize. And you are allowed to live on that day. So, here's your next activity. Think about what you want your research design to be. And then, what is your research question? Now, we already have what your disparity is that you're looking at. So now think about your design and what your research question is in your groups. When you go and you're doing research, I always like to say there are different types of research that you can do in the field. One of it is a traditional type research. And then you have what they call community-based participatory research. And they're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. When you think about traditional research, what that means is exactly what you're doing right now. You thought of the question, you thought of what you were going to do to get it done, and you thought out what's going to occur in that process. So everything is researcher controlled, okay? Then you got the opposite end of what research is in a community, and they call that community-based participatory research. With this one, community does a lot of the control, okay? The other thing that's really important about community-based research is that the research topic is usually determined by the community's interest and what they need. Whereas, so when I went into Southeastern Virginia to do my particular subject or topic, I went in there thinking diabetes was the priority. But if I was doing community-based participatory research, I could have gotten in there and talked to a bunch of the leaders in the community, and they could have said to me, we got a problem with violence in this community. We want something related to violence. And if this was the paradigm that I was using, then that's what I would have had to have done, was something related to violence. Okay? So they're definitely, these are on opposite ends of the spectrum, because community-based research has a lot of community control and input. The community also helps you determine how you're going to do it, because you do it based upon the capacity of the community, okay? And they talk to you about methodology. It's mutually determined, all built upon what this community's strengths are. Here, we're not necessarily taking into as much consideration as what all the strengths are. Because the expectation is we're going to build what strengths they don't have. Okay? And we're going to make up for it, and we'll use what they have. Here, the strengths that they have, not only will we utilize those strengths, but we'll build upon it and create new things. Okay? And when we leave from this side, we'll have something that they can sustain and continue to do even when we're gone. In this paradigm, when we leave, the chances are the project leaves, because we didn't do anything to allow them to sustain what we were doing and build the capacities or the needs that they had. So in my project, what we did was community engagement, and this is how you get it started. You go in there, you got this idea of what you're going to do. You start meeting with community people, and this is what I call my my speed dating, because that's really what it is. You go in a community and you meet anybody and everybody that wants to talk to you. You talk to the mayors, you talk to the senators, you talk to people in the House, you talk to people in the state legislature, because what you want to do is to see if they're going to support your project. And most of the people at this level, they support your project. So it only takes a few minutes, and most of the time when you have people that are who are government officials, really what they're going to do is they're going to support you from a mouth standpoint. They're not going to do too much work for you. You know, that your senator is not going to come out of the House of Representatives and start getting on the campaign trail for your project. But what they'll do is say, we support it, put our name on it, when you send out brochures and things like that. And that's good, because you want to be able to utilize the strengths and the availabilities that people have for you. You go to the community organizations and the newspapers. Newspapers are great because newspapers help you get the word around, and they publish things for you about your project so that people can start talking about it. The other thing is community organizations are also wonderful, because you can partner with community organizations, and some organizations actually have things that they have as initiatives for their organizations. Like, for example, we partnered with the AKAs. The AKAs have a health mission that they like to do each and every year. And what they do is they focus on a health topic, and they expose that particular topic to people in the community, and they do it as a community service project. So what we did was we partnered with the AKAs on this project so that they could become a part of what we were doing, but they helped us in recruitment, and the AKAs also helped us during our intervention to help us get it going and get us into doors in which we may not have been able to go to. We partnered with church organizations and church pastors. We talked to, and I don't want to forget, we did partner with the Sigmas too. That was a fraternity that we've partnered with. And with the Masons and the Eastern Stars. That's what it was, Eastern Star. We partnered with them too. Churches and church pastors. Pastors are still very influential in rural communities, and they're very strong leaders. And we talked to many different pastors, you know? And there were pastors that allowed us to come in on Sunday. And we used to do that, what I call the speed church. We go in on Sunday to different churches, and the pastor would see us when we'd come in, and I'd go in and give my spiel about the project and what we were doing and how we wanted people to participate. And this is also, I think, a part of cultural competency. My study coordinator and the person who works closest to me is a Northerner, and I'm a Southerner. I'm a Southern girl. And so we went into one of our first churches, and the pastor had called us to the front because we were going to talk about our project. So my Northern heathen friend, who was also the coordinator, and you know what, we probably should, can you edit that out the video just in case she listens to this? I'd hate for her to see me say this about her. But anyway, when the pastor called, she walked on the pulpit and got in front of the mic and started talking. Now, I don't know if any of you have Southern traditions and been in Black Baptist churches. You don't go on a pulpit if you are not a minister and get up to the mic and start talking like you a preacher. She was like, and I'm here with the diabetes. And I think the whole church got silent. Yes.
Think about the culture in which he comes from.
That's right, where they can do that kind of stuff.
They can do that kind of stuff.
That's right. In the South, you don't do that. I was like, oh my gosh. I stepped to the side. I was like, lightning is about to strike my person right now, right now. The minister was standing up beside her like, you need to go and get on the floor. She never caught any of the cues that he was giving her. Now, mind you, I'm standing down where I'm supposed to be, and I'm looking over there at her like, you need to come down here. But it was a major taboo. She really messed up. But she didn't have Southern cultural competency. You can't do that. You got to stand right down there where they read those morning announcements. Right there at that little podium, standing out there in the front over there by the communion table. That's where you stand in Southern Baptist churches. I don't know what she was thinking about. And the pastor said something to us afterwards too. You best believe that. Because he didn't appreciate it. But like I said, so when we got in the car, I said to her, I said, you know what? How about you just follow me rather than be in front of me? Because there are things that you can't do in these churches, you know? And I said to her, and when she started talking, the other thing that she did, which you should not be doing, she stood up there and she just started talking immediately about the project. I said, don't do that. You get up there and you say, I'm going to give honor to God, and I thank you, Pastor, for inviting me to your church, and I recognize the people on the pulpit. I said, that's what you do when you go to a Southern church. You don't get up there and just start talking. What is wrong with you, girl? This is not the way it goes. So for me, as a Southerner who had cultural competency, who was raised in church, I knew that's what you do. My Northern friend, who was part of my study, almost got kicked out the town because she did two things that were totally inappropriate that you just should not be doing. And so it's so important to remember that these people are your gatekeepers. They're the ones who are going to talk about you either positively or negatively. So when we walked out there, imagine what they were saying about her. You know? But I tried to clean it up because she talked before me, and I tried to clean it up when I got to the podium. Fortunately, my mama really did have me in church every week. You know? Fortunately, I can quote some Bible verses. Fortunately, I can even get a scripture, tell you the book, the verse, and all that stuff. And I can bring it on home and talk about exactly what I'm supposed to talk about. And I can talk about the fact that God says treat the temple, your body as a temple. And that's why we're doing this project. So I had to clean up her mess and bring it on home so that the people can know she just a heathen. She don't know no better. But clearly, the girl in charge, she know what she doing. Because that's what it had to be about at that church at that moment. Because you imagine, if I allow her to do that and we walk away, we lose all credibility in that church. And in a small community, when you lose credibility, you're done. Because those people are going to talk to other people, and other people are going to talk to other people, and that pastor going to talk to the other people. And the next thing you know, nobody wants to be a part of what you're doing. So you got to clean that up. We also went to clinical practices in hospitals, and we talked to people that would like me, nurse practitioners, physicians, PAs, and all of that stuff, and told them about what we were doing. Because what we wanted to do was to saturate the whole community about this new program that was coming to this town, and we want you to be involved in it, and it's not going to cost you anything. The only thing it's going to ever cost you is time. But we're even going to pay for your gas to get to the project. So you don't even have to worry about that. And when you get there, we're going to feed you too. The other thing that we talked about is who we needed. We wanted African American people with type 2 diabetes, but we also wanted their family members to take part in it. So we had tons of collaborations. We had community partners, we had newspapers, we had political leaders, we worked with existing community groups because there was a group there that did diabetes education. We brought them into the fold. Because the other thing that you don't want to do, if they have a group that's doing something similar to you, don't take over what they're doing. Become a part of what they're doing and give them any tools that they need to enhance what they're doing. And they will rapidly jump on board from you. People don't want to think that the outsider coming in knows all, does all, and can be all, and knows more than what they do. Because remember, I always say, these people live in this community. They're the experts of their community. You are not the know-all and be-all because you came in there. You know? And although my family lives there, everybody don't know who my family is. So, but they know I don't live there I don't live there anymore. So I still was a girl from the town, but I didn't live there. So I needed to make sure that I acknowledge these people as experts. Recruitment and retention is very important. People have to be encouraged to continue to come. We call people every single week to remind them to show up for their educational classes. We sent letters every single week to tell them, come to the class today, okay? If we call and the person said, well, she's at Grandma so-and-so house right now, so I'll give her the message. We said, no, we'll call Grandma's house. What's the number? And we called Grandma's house and said, hey, can I speak to your granddaughter, blah, 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 blah. Hey, I'm calling you just to remind you to show up on Wednesday. All right. We talked to everybody. We gave reminders. We called people's jobs if they wanted us to call jobs. We left messages because our whole thing was people may have an incentive to come to something maybe 1 or 2 times, but this thing lasted for almost 3 months. So we needed them to come every week. And you have to do things to get people to remain interested. So what we did, we had a 98% retention rate, which is fabulous. Because what they say is that African American people won't come to things after 1 or 2 times, but we didn't have that problem. We also advertised the study in newspapers, and we advertised through community organizations. So what we did was we put things in church bulletins. Okay? And here's the other thing that I was telling, this is my northern friend. Only certain people in the church do a church bulletin. It ain't never the pastor. Don't send my church bulletin stuff to the church pastor, because he don't do that stuff. The church secretary does that. And you need to ask her, does she want you to give her something pre-printed that's on something that looks like yours? Or does she want you to give her the words and she'll just print it there herself? And I said, now, if you need it to look fancy, then you got to send it pre-printed to her, because the church secretary is not going to do that. And remember, church bulletins are 8.5 by 11, and they folded in half. So whatever you said got to fit into that folded half bulletin. And talking to her about it, I realized I don't know if she had ever been to church, at least not to a southern church. But you got to remember certain things that occur in certain communities and always honor what those things are. So here's your last activity. Who are the partners for your projects? And how will you recruit and retain your participants? And so we'll give 5 minutes to that so that we can end this on time. For this part, I actually wanted to hear each group kind of present what you came up with. And then we'll get into the results from my study and where we were. So I'm going to actually start over here on the left, my gentleman over there. Tell us, what's your health disparity that you were looking at?
Basically, we were looking at African American students not transitioning for education-wise. Mm-hmm. And we actually came up with some of the reasons why we felt like it wasn't transitioning. Mm-hmm. And we said lack of parents support,
wow.
Lack of motivation,
uh-huh.
Lack of parents not being educated.
Uh-huh. Cool.
Lack of, and I guess pretty much lack of living in poverty.
Uh-huh.
Whereas, motivating, pushing education is not the norm.
Right.
Getting a job is pretty much the norm.
Okay. So what do you think you all would be able to do about it? What kind of ideas did you have? And who could you help, who could you work with to get that thing done, to get it done?
To work with the church.
Uh-huh.
Work with actually the NAACP.
Okay.
Actually collaborate and talk to college students.
Uh-huh.
And also talk to alumni that actually already graduated college.
Okay.
To actually talk to those students.
Right. That's good. And what's your question that you're looking at? Okay, cool. And what kind of design were you all thinking about? Was this a non-experimental design?
The design we were thinking about was pretty much, actually,
It's an experimental design. Okay, so you're going to have a control group and an experimental group, and your experimental group will be able to talk to those people that you were talking about, the NAACP, college alumni, and things like that. That's great. That's a good job. Wonderful. Is there something you wanted to add? Okay, so let me go to this group. What'd you all come up with?
I was trying to write it down.
Okay.
We was thinking about smoking and drinking,
Uh-huh.
and our causes were like stress, causes like being away from home,
Mm-hmm.
social influences from like family and peers,
Uh-huh.
unemployment,
Right.
community and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
peer pressure, and like the taste of the
Of the product.
yeah, the product.
Uh-huh. Cool. Good stuff.
Our question was how can we deter people from smoking and drinking?
All right. So,
Our design was like non-experimental,
okay.
like survey.
Uh-huh.
But then, like, we could also do a survey, then do an experimental, and then
Okay.
do another survey. He was saying something.
I was just suggesting maybe a pre and post type,
Uh-huh.
analysis of where they are if we were to do like some sort of experimental group.
Okay.
Where they were in the beginning, whatever program we implement, and then where they are at the end, and try to see if there's a change.
To see if you can decrease the smoking or even the drinking.
Right.
Okay, great. Who would you like to collaborate with to get this done?
Well, probably the fraternities and stuff on the campus for one.
Okay.
They can bring in like the applicants, or the people that do surveys.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So they'll help you with getting the surveys out and doing things like that.
Hospitals, probably.
Okay.
Especially with recruitment, because they are such an untapped source on this campus.
Right.
And if they snap their fingers, 200 people show up.
Wonderful. Okay, so we got some built-in recruitment strategies too. And what about my group right here in the back?
Actually, we're looking at mental health days. We're looking at this from a mental health perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to look at the mental health services as a weakness. And the question we came up with was, would African Americans in rural communities benefit from the integration of psychology and primary health care?
Wow.
Primary health services.
Which is great because you know this county has an F for mental health services in the state as far as not meeting the needs of mental health for the state of Georgia. Certainly, keep going. What's your design?
Our design, we're going to do a project
Okay,
with doing surveys.
okay,
The other thing we want to look at also is that we like to improve the quality of life. Knowing that when we involve families, communities, looking at the stigmas and barriers that go along with mental health. Also looking at the home health model, the one-stop shop, where you go to perhaps a clinic and you've got an area that's designated for mental health services. You don't have to deal with that person's being crazy, they're looking at me.
right, good.
Crazy.
That's fabulous. I mean, you all have done, I think, some excellent projects, and I hope that the activities in and of themselves move you forward, because I'm not sure if you all have research projects that you are doing for undergrad as part of your completion, but you've definitely started on something that you can move ahead. It doesn't have to be as big of a project as what I'm doing, because it all starts small. And remember I told you that I did that one when I was at another university. I had no funding for that, and I did that with a budget of like $200-300, and it was just surveys. So a project can be a research project in spite of funding or lack of funding. And you can do things like surveys because they're cheap. And you can use built-in communities. Like this gentleman said he was going to use fraternities. You said you're using churches. There are different communities you can use that can help you facilitate these projects. So now I just kind of want to touch briefly about some of the results that I had from my project that I did in the community. So what we did was we did focus groups originally to find out what did the people in the community actually think. So what we found was that family provided support. And one of the biggest triggers on why people provided support for people who had type 2 diabetes was if that person was hospitalized and got very sick. And what we found is that if they went to the hospital, and what this person is saying, that they could provide more support. And this person said, when I got real sick and had to go to the hospital, they said, we're going to help you, Mom. And they started helping me around the house so I could take better care of myself. So one of the things that I decided to do with my intervention was talk to people and have people recollect the last time they had a serious illness and talk to their family members about it. Because there's something about this illness thing that not only allows the person who has diabetes to say that I was sick and I am sick, but it allows the family members to become more supportive of that person in their day-to-day lives. The other thing that we found was that people did better if their family expressed emotional support, and that was caring and expressing love. So like this one lady, she was talking about losing weight and how that felt good to her. And what she said was, my husband told me I looked good after losing that weight. Our whole relationship changed. Now I try to keep the weight off. And for her, that was a huge incentive. She wanted to look good for her husband. So her whole thing was, I'm going to keep losing this weight because I look good to my husband. And we brought the husband in with her. And he talked to her about, the weight loss looks good on her. And he encouraged her in that way. Family members, one of the huge barriers to following the diet was that people didn't want to prepare different foods in their home. So if dad had diabetes or mom had diabetes, they didn't want to eat these foods for them and then have a whole different food for everybody else. And so what we tried to do is have family members eat the same things in their home regardless. So that's what this person is commenting to. Now she, as well as her family, they all eat the same stuff. We got to be healthy together. They agreed because they love and don't want to see nothing happen to me. Even when I want to cheat, somebody is encouraging me to stick to it. So this is her whole family has made a change so that they can have better management of their diabetes. The things that were barriers for this particular study is if they didn't have the knowledge. And this knowledge was a barrier if the person with diabetes didn't have the knowledge, but even if the family doesn't have the knowledge. Because if they don't know, they don't encourage and they don't support. So this is somebody that was commenting from their family member. They said, they don't understand diabetes, so they don't know what I go through, so no one helps me with anything. Housework, the cooking, or the cleaning. I got to do it all like I'm not really sick. One time my husband said, you only got sugar. Why are you acting like you sick? So she was saying that they don't understand. They don't know what I go through. So that was another reason why we brought in family members to help with that knowledge barrier. And then we had people who said, I'm just doing too much to take care of myself. And that's called the multi-caregiver role. So the more responsibilities a person had, the less likely they were to be able to manage their diabetes. The other part that was a barrier was social gatherings. And this is one of the things why we came up with that 90-10 rule. This person is saying, when I go somewhere to socialize, they don't care what I need. No one thinks about my diabetes when we get together for birthdays, Sunday dinner, or anything. The food is not what I can eat. If you care, you would make sure I can eat and celebrate too. I just eat it. I'm not going to sit around and watch everybody else have fun. This is a person that was struggling with family gatherings because they want to have fun, they want to participate in what's going on, but they don't want to have to be sick and they want people to think about them. So that's another thing that we did. We brought in family members so that they know, hey, these are selections that you can have. But we also started talking about that 90-10 rule. And then we had, this is the end of the intervention. There were 48 people in each group. We had African Americans with diabetes and family members, and there were a total of 48. And if you can look at this, some of the abnormal things that values that we had at the beginning is that people were definitely obese at a BMI of 36.1. The blood pressures weren't controlled. Their blood sugars weren't controlled either. But here's the other thing that was unique about this group. Look at the socioeconomic status of my participants. 19% of them completed high school, but I had 24% of the people that did not complete high school that were in this study. I had people in my study who could barely read. And one of the things that we did, because we realized that this is what the population looks like, is that we made sure that even if you couldn't read, we talked enough and had enough pictures in everything that we did every single day, so that you never had to say to someone, I can't read and I don't know what's going on. People who couldn't read, if there were things that we were going to do that day that required a lot of reading, we had enough people in each class that had to just go to everything and say, hey, let me help you with this. Because we never wanted someone to have to tell us in the class, I can't read, I need some help. So we automatically helped people throughout every class so that no one ever had to admit that. I was a grown woman when I found out that my granddad could not read, because he was too proud to let anyone know. And he had figured out how to do enough things so that he didn't have to tell anyone. So one of the things that he used to say, and I remember this now as a child, he'd be doing something. He said, baby, your granddad don't even know where his glasses are. Come over here and read this to me. He never told me, baby, I can't even read. But he would say, I can't find my glasses. Come over here and read this to me. And I would go there just like a little grandchild and just start reading it. I never knew. My grandmother just happened to tell me one day. Annual household, 24% made less than $10,000. 28% of those participants only made $10,000 to $20,000. This is actually in their household. Most of the people had anywhere from 2 to 6 people in their household. So you had basically 52% of the people that made less than $20,000. We had more females than males. Here, the demographics, regardless if you were a family member or a person with diabetes, you had a whole lot going on. Okay? Because supposedly the thought was if you have diabetes, you expect some of these different illnesses. But look at their family members. Same thing. That also shows that if you live with someone from a physiological standpoint, you are likely to mirror them, because you're practically doing the same things every day, all day. That's why you can go into a household and then mama come out, she's obese, daddy come out, he obese. Then they got a whole bunch of little obese little kids running behind them. Because they all eating the same stuff in the same way, doing the same activity, which is watching TV every day. That's why. And this is a mirror of what we see every day. Here's the thing that we were able to do with the intervention. We decreased their blood pressure. We decreased the blood pressure of family members. We decreased the blood pressure of people who had diabetes, which is huge. Blood pressure problems in general and diabetes, that is your precursor to who's going to have your heart attacks and your strokes. And so we were able to actually have decreases in that. We also decreased the BMIs. That is a measure of obesity. Everybody lost weight in this study. People with diabetes and their family members, because we got them to the point where they were doing it together, and that was the whole point of it. Now, this is the experimental group. The control group, we weren't as successful. And remember, the control group were people who didn't have family members with them, and we weren't as successful. Control group was iffy. Sometimes they were able to get good results, other times they weren't. But our experimental group looked pretty good. Hemoglobin A1C was not significant. The main reason why this wasn't significant was because there's not enough of a variation in the standard deviation in the population to be able to detect even a medium or small effect size. So we really needed a higher population to be able to find something there. So my research findings, just as a whole, the BMI decreased. The families started reporting that they could do it together, those that were in the experimental group. Education, children at home having Medicare, no insurance, and age, they moderated hemoglobin A1C, BMI, BP, and cholesterol. And what that means is that for my control group, all these things were significant. Okay? However, for my experimental group, hardly any of this made a difference. The family was a much more stronger predictor, which meant that even if you was broke, if your family wanted to do what you wanted to do to get your health right, you could do it. Family made a difference. The other thing is that we were able to show that the better communication, problem solving, and role skills in a family, which is how we measured family function, made a difference for how they improved their cholesterol. So it really made a difference for them, and weight loss too. So here are my nursing implications. Remember that, and I know that I'm the only nurse in this room, so I'll just kind of make it a bit broader. But remember that no matter who you see, they are a part of a community and an environment, and they are not just one person. So remember that no matter what community you go into, it's about holism, and it's about looking at that person as an individual, but an individual that interacts with many different systems, and you have to look at all those systems for that particular person. The other thing is, I say, utilize the strengths of African American families for better health. We as African Americans, we may have a lot of disease burden, but we have a whole lot of strengths. And recognize that those strengths exist. So you shouldn't be there in front of them. One of the things that people talk about all the time is that putting fat back in your collard greens and all of that stuff. You don't have to tell every African American you can no longer put fat back in your collard greens. If you do the 90-10 rule, they can do it 10% of the time. They can do it every once in a while. And on those times in which they decide, well, maybe, what you do is tell them how to moderate it. So I used to always tell people, this is what you do. Put your collard greens in the pot, put your fat back in your stuff, and boil it on in. After you boil it, all you have to do is put it in the refrigerator, and all the fat and the grease floats up to the top. Remove that, throw it away, and then eat your collard greens. You still got the flavor, but you don't have the fat in there. So that still, it pays honor and tribute to our African American culture and things that we like with the flavor, but we're just taking out some of the unhealthy ingredients. Because remember, not everything we do is bad, and it sure enough tastes good. And so keep that in mind as you go. The other thing is that remember that we are a people that pretty much, we like unity. We like to be together. We like to socialize. We are a very communal group. And socialization is a big part of who we are with a lot of different things that we do. And so I always, and I love to show this video because it reminds me of my family a lot, but I think it's the epitome of African American family reunions. And so I show this video, and I'll put it up. 80-something-year-old? She could barely read, but she really told me that I had no common sense when I was treating her. Be active in the community. When you go into a community, you cannot sit in your ivory tower, which is called the university, and tell those people what to do. Go into the community and be a part of that community. If that means you have to be in that community 3-4 times a week, then be there. That's what you should do. Be a part of their groups. Be a part of everything that they do. Collaboration and team building. Build on their strengths. Realize that every community has strengths. Recognize what they are and build upon them. Build trust. Do what you say and say what you mean. If you tell someone you're going to be there at 9 o'clock, be there at 9 o'clock. Don't get there at 9:30, because after that, people are going to say, oh, she'll just waste your time. Never let the rumors start about what you are and what you are not. Always stay true to who you are and do exactly what you say. Recognize that community people and organizations have their own priorities. If you come up with a list of stuff that you need them to do to participate in your project, remember, they might do one thing on your list. Ask people what they want to do because they have other priorities. People have other jobs. Just because they're the church secretary don't mean that that's all they do. They might be the church secretary. They also might be a school teacher in the high school. You can't give them so much work for the church secretary that it's influencing what they can do in the high school. Recognize these people got other jobs and other priorities. They don't mind participating in what you're doing, but be realistic in your expectations. Keep it simple. People don't want to need a PhD to do what you've asked them to do. They want to be able to do what you want them to do, and just keep it simple. Ask for your community members' opinion about, will this really work? Just because you have a brilliant idea doesn't mean it's going to work in that community. Ask the people that are in the community. They know more than you do about what happens there every single day. Realize that the generation of knowledge and the community intervention, it should be beneficial for everyone. You should not be the one that's getting it all. They should benefit from what you are doing. Doing something just for the sake of science in a community is crazy. Everybody in that community who's a part of your project should have some benefit from it. When you investigate things on a community project, remember it's multidimensional. It can be social, economic, physiological. Include those variables when you're doing your investigations because people are not solo entities. The other part is for your results. Disseminate your results in your research. Disseminate it not only in academia if you are a faculty member, but tell the people in the community what you find out. Publish it. Talk to them about it because they themselves want to know and they want to be the benefit of it and they want to make change. Create sustainability. Give the people what they need to continue to do whatever it is that you brought to them. Don't leave on Monday and then no one ever hears from you again or the project again because people want to know that they participated in something that not only benefited them for the time that you were there, but they can continue for the next generations to come. Remember that first picture I showed you all was my grandmother, my granddaddy, my parents, but in the right-hand corner was that generation to come. That was my 4-year-old daughter in that. Remember, that's why you're creating sustainability. It's not for my grandmama. My grandma was 92, 94, and like she said, baby, I'm just living on God's grace. So she's already know, my fate has been decided, but my baby has the world ahead of her. She's 4, and that's what you're creating your sustainability for. Okay, so with that, I just want to show you that slide, and I cannot figure out why it won't let me escape out of this. Can you help me, Chris? Does it pop up? This reminds me of my family. We do this at every family reunion. We had a Soul Train line. And every time I see this, this reminds me of family. This reminds me of family reunion. This reminds me of just life in general. And this is from that movie, This Christmas. And I just love it because everybody, no matter what age you are, no matter what size you are, you can bust a move and everybody's appreciative. So with that, I say thank you so much for your attention and your time and good luck to you all as you move forward with research.